Okay, so we might get started. Hi everyone, thanks for coming this afternoon. My name's Emma Walk. I'm a Yanggabal Bundjalung woman, and I want to say Jadanali Mer Juggi Jugana. We stand on solid ground, and we're on the solid ground of the Widjabul Waibal people of the Bundjalung Nation. And I'd really like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. And in particular, today I'd like to acknowledge Dave Edwards for the session that he's going to run for us. So we're in the Rural Health Seminar Series for 2002. Can I ask before we begin that people please keep their microphone muted? Microphone muted. The seminar is actually being videoed and recorded. So, obviously we want to make sure that we don't hear any noises from anybody other than Dave. There'll be plenty of time for questions at the end of the presentation. Feel free to write any of your questions in the chat function. Or if you want to put your hand up to ask a question, please do so. Also to note that the next session is going to be Dr. Sarah Bernays on 6th of October 2022, and she's talking about community resilience in the face of adversity, what makes it and what breaks it, examining the contributions and limitations of community-based HIV peace support to adolescents' wellbeing in Southern Africa. So put that in your diary. And also you can see at the bottom here, we've got the Twitter and Facebook handles. So if you're tweeting today or putting out anything on Facebook, please use those two handles. Really like to welcome David Edwards here today. David is a Warramai man and works promoting father-inclusive practice in the perinatal space within the University of Newcastle's SMS4Dads project. As Manager Indigenous Resources, as well as being a voluntary trainer for the Core of Life Pregnancy and Childbirth Educational Program for young people. David also works with the University of Sydney Centre for Rural Health as a Director for the Wellmob Indigenous Wellbeing website project under the National E-Mental Health in Practice program. David is also a member of the Department of Health's National Digital Mental Health Advisory Group, Menzies School of Health Research Stay Strong Expert Reference Group, and Beyond Blue, the Way Back to Support Service Advisory Group. Thanks, Dave. We're really looking forward to hearing your session today, and I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Emma, for that warm welcome. I'll share my screen, not just looking at me. Weeabil Gujiyigu, or welcome. Hello, in Gutdung. As Emma said, I'm a Warramai fellow, so I'm off country, and I thank Emma's welcome to Bundjalung country and Widjabul Waibal country, from which I zoom from at the UCRH in Lismore. So today I'm going to talk about SMS4Dads, or also soon to be called SMS4Deadly Dads for our Indigenous fathers, which will be launched about the 13th of October. And it's basically an information service for our First Nations fathers and also non-Indigenous dads during the perinatal period, but I'll talk a bit more about it shortly. Thanks for the acknowledgement of country. Emma, I just sort of thought I'd say a little bit more about myself in the context of this presentation about SMS4Dads. I'm a father of 2 young men now, and I've had my father who's got Gammy Bingal ancestry from Karua, and on my mother's side, I've got Welsh, Irish, and English heritage. And I guess I fell into this project because I was very passionate about working with young men around the fathering journey, because not a lot of us have had great role models, and there's some really deadly mums and bubs programs out there, some of which have emanated from the UCRH here. And there's not a lot of, I guess, support and empowering sort of projects for our dads. So a bit of acknowledgement for all our deadly dads out there. And to start off my presentation, I would like to just put a little quote there from one of our deadly dads. This is a Wiradjuri brother, Caden Powell, who used the SMS4Dads service while he was waiting for Yindamara to come along. And post-birth also, the messages do go through to when Bub's 1 year of age. And he found it very empowering and just great to get a nudge every now and again from the text messages about some of the tips and stages of Bub that he might be facing. So we'll talk a bit more about the timing of the messages and some of the content in a minute. But today I'm just going to give you a bit of an overview of what SMS4Dads is. It's, as I mentioned at the start, it's really an information service, a health promotion program. Who's it for and who's involved? Like, it's essentially soon to be a new dads. And I'll talk about some of the project partners. Why do it? This is the most important reason I'd like to talk about. Is that there's a growing base of evidence demonstrating the importance of father-inclusive practice and how important engaged dads are in child development and also in supporting mum. We know that he is the best support for her. Unlike some of our practitioners might think, mum actually turns to the paternal dad for information and support during both the pre and postnatal period. And I guess most of all, I'm going to talk about how our rural and Indigenous dads in rural areas probably need a bit more attention in this space. And we've developed an Indigenous specific version of SMS4Dads to be rolled out in mid-October. So what is it? It's a text-based information service, as I mentioned. What it looks like is generally men sign up. They get an SMS sent to their mobile 3 times a week for up to 18 months. And I'll break that down a little bit further on. It's really, the text messages are short and simple tips with information and some hyperlinks. Most of the messages are under 50 characters. So we know attention spans are pretty short when it comes to text messaging. So we keep it short and simple. There's also a mood checker built in to the message set every 3 weeks, which is what it sounds like. It checks the mood of the dad and enables them to check in. And generally, the information is really about empowering our dads. It provides really practical tips. Also, all the information is really relevant to the age and stage of bub. So when they do enroll, they put in the expected date of delivery of bub, or if they have enrolled post-birth, the age or the date of birth of bub. And all the messages are pretty much linked to what might be going on at the time. So in general, it's about giving our dads, good information to base their decisions on around fathering, supporting their partner and looking after themselves. Very quickly, who's involved? As Emma mentioned at the intro, I'm working part-time for the University of Newcastle, who have secured funding from the Department of Health for this project until 2024. And it's really focusing on rural and remote dads. We're also partnered up with the Red Nose and Perinatal Anxiety and Neonatal Depression Australia, the Australian Rural Health Alliance, Health Infonet, and Telethon Kids Institute. And the main push for this round of SMS4Dads is, as I mentioned, for dads that live outside of our capital cities, which we can tell through registration process, which asks the enrolled dad to put their postcode down. We've also got a lot of involvement for the SMS4Deadly dads from some of our amazing and deadly Aboriginal men's health workers across the country. We've had some project governance by an advisory group made up of these men. We've got some partnerships with some really important and influential regional Aboriginal medical centres. The Broome Men's Centre, Mirabirre out at Moree, and Middenbar up on the Gold Coast. We've also got lots of local champions, the Australian Family Nurse Partnership Program. That's pretty much Australia-wide, I think, except for WA and possibly ACT. Baby Coming You Ready in WA, and lots of Aboriginal community-controlled health organisations. We've also got a partnership, as I mentioned before, with PANDA, Perinatal Anxiety Neonatal Depression Australia, to provide counselling service. As well as we're negotiating with 1300 Yarn, who are affiliated with Lifeline and have Indigenous men and counsellors for dads that might need some support. So who's it for? It's, as I mentioned, soon to be a new dad. So it's not actually aiming at, dads down the track of the parenting journey. We're really trying to look at this project as a I guess, early intervention type of project in terms of health promotion. So dads can enroll anywhere from when their partner's 12 weeks pregnant through to actual 6 months post-birth, because the messages continue up until 12 months after birth. It's really simple, free online registration process. It only takes about 5 minutes. Yeah, they put their name and their age, their phone number and their postcode, as I mentioned before, expected date of delivery or date of birth, bub, if they're Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, and if it's their first baby. We also do a bit of a Kessler-6 assessment that they link through to just check how the men are going initially when they sign up. And I'll talk more about the reason for that shortly. So why do we do it? Well, research has shown, as I mentioned earlier, that dads play a big role in child development, and there's not a lot happening out there to support new dads, and especially our First Nations dads. Most maternal health services are starting to embody father-inclusive practice, but there's a long way to go. So dads are relearning about how to be included in the parenting journey. I know from my personal experience, my dad struggled with becoming a dad, and he was young, had lots of work commitments, and I don't think he had the greatest role model. And as a result, you know, I think a lot of us men fumble our way through fatherhood, to be quite honest, and try and learn on the go, on the run, and try and team up with our partners to do the best job we can. But we want to really nurture that father-baby relationship from the get-go. You know, it's all about bonding and attachment, and trying to create the messages to give dad a nudge in that space, to get them ready to find their way into co-parenting. I mentioned before about he is her best support. Research has shown from this certainly this study in 2016 that women's use of primary healthcare and maternity health services in the first year after birth shows that their intimate partner is the biggest support. 90% said that. Health professionals and GPs and helplines are a bit further down the track. So it's really important to acknowledge that dads are the best support for mum, and we need to give them a bit of a how-to and support, and how they can do the best job to support mum in the parenting and child raising stakes. I guess, you know, we try and sort of keep the messaging fairly practical. So it's about telling dads how to functionally support their partner in this perinatal sort of period, and also just giving them encouragement and sometimes praise about, you know, doing a good job. And we get a lot of good feedback from dads saying, thanks for that little nudge. I did that straight away and she loved it. So, you know, I think we're getting good results when we get those anecdotal feedback. And certainly some of the focus group workshops we've run with dads that have completed the program have been very positive around the messaging. A very quick overview with this infographic, which might be a bit hard to read some of the text, just showing you the overall process from enrolment or sign up through to you know, links to services and support. Whilst it might be a bit difficult to read, I know it is on my screen. The main point here is that there's some user interaction. It's not just a one-way street. The messages do include this 3-weekly mood checker, which can activate a link to counselling support if dads aren't going well, and I'll unpack that a little bit down the track. And also, if you're a First Nations dad, we will send a Indigenous specific set of messages that have got some culturally responsive and relevant content in there once we launch that in the middle of October. But importantly too, if we find out the dad responds to us and bub is preemie, or their partner has had a miscarriage or stillbirth, they're also sent a special set of messages and links to support from Red Nose and Panda. So there's opportunities for interaction from the dads who enroll. As I mentioned before, it's all about supporting our soon-to-be and new dads with information, and we all know information is power. So we want to empower our men in this fatherhood journey. The three main pillars of our messaging are up there on the screen. It's really about bonding and attachment, the father-mother co-parenting journey, and supporting dad to think about himself, practice some self-care and to reach out if he's not going so well. I thought it'd be good just to give everyone a bit of a sample of the messages, but I'll ask if Emma can put in the chat, that link, Emma, to the sample set of messages. If you'd like to experience SMS for Dads in a little microcosm for 1 week, you can sign up for a sample set through the link that Em will put in the chat, and it will give you 8 messages over 1 week to give you a bit of an idea. But here's some examples. I've chosen some examples for those 3 pillars of the messaging that I mentioned before. So the first one's that bonding and attachment. So these messages are really, I've given an example of a prenatal message. So if a dad signs up before bub's due versus a postnatal one, the prenatal one's really about visualizing bub growing and possibly, the future cultural connections of that baby. So this is from the SMS for Deadly Dads messages. So you're getting a sneak preview of some of the culturally imbued messages. So it talks about bub being as long as a footy now. And like most dads follow some code of footy, as you might know. But it says all the messages are framed they're coming from baby. It says, my legs are growing and I might try and shake a leg. Imagine that. So that's our saying for dance. Everyone knows about shake a leg probably with Aboriginal dancing. So it's trying to give dad a bit of a connection to bub growing in utero. And that message comes out at minus 19 weeks, so 19 weeks before birth. You can see in brackets. The postnatal message there is giving dad a nudge to be involved in nurturing and settling bub once born. And you can see there's a little link to a video, because this one's about connecting to kin, country and culture. And check out this video about getting bub on country. What I might do is I might reshare and just show you one of those videos, because it only goes for about less than a minute. So I might just stop that and reshare with my other screen. Actually, just get out of that. Just bear with me. So this is a video Uncle Mick Adams from Larrakia country did for us, and I'll let you get a bit of a feel for some of the links to short videos that our Indigenous dads will get around connecting to culture.
As baby develop, they're nurturing inside the womb. It'd be good if you could go and stand and talk to the child. Put your head on your wife's belly and start talking to the child. Sing them a song. Talk about culture. Tell them a story. When they come out, they'll identify you straight away. They'll know that voice and they want to follow to where you are. As soon as you talk, they'll be looking for you.
So that's just an example of one. I'll just go back to my presentation slides. Bear with me. Sorry, I'll switch over my slides. It's never as seamless, is it, sharing videos on screen? Anyway, I find it difficult. Here's another example of a messaging around the co-parenting or team parenting pillar. So prenatal message there is around, we know from research that women make decisions around breastfeeding in that antenatal period, normally in the second trimester of pregnancy. So we're really trying to get dad on board. And this message is from Bub, trying to get dad on board about having a yarn with mum around breastfeeding. And we've got a great video of some Aboriginal men talking about how they support their partners with breastfeeding as a link. The postnatal message there about gathering as a family, there's a lot of strength-based cultural messages in there, because we know that culture is a protective health factor for our men, and we're trying to sort of give them a nudge to tap into their culture, or to reach out to elders and uncles to get advice in the parenting journey. So the final example of messages I'll show you is around the self-care message pillar. And the prenatal one there is really about, giving dad a nudge to get support if he needs in his own health and well-being. And there's some tips there to getting exercise. The postnatal message example I've got there at 35 weeks after Bub's born is around weight gain. It's not only our women that can experience weight gain after birth, and this one was about Bub saying to dad, "I'm going to triple my weight in the first year of life. Don't let this happen to you." Funnily enough, we got a little bit of negative feedback from our men about, you're calling me fat, and I don't like being judged. So we've changed that message to, this can be a tricky time for dads to say, stay healthy and keep your weight down. Here's some tips. So I guess the point being that we do adapt our messaging quite frequently based on feedback. I mentioned about the mood checker before. This is an example of a mood checker that comes through about 6 weeks after birth, because we know that's when babies start to find their lungs and they cry a lot. So we're checking in with dads specifically at the stage of Bub when they're crying, and just seeing how stressed they are if baby's crying and how they have coped. And if they haven't coped well, this is an opportunity to link them to some counselling support. So the mood checkers, as I said, around every 3 or 4 weeks, it's got really 3 key aims, and it's about normalising those difficulties that dad might be facing at the time, raise their own awareness around their physical and emotional state, and link them to assistance. So if they do text back that they're not going well, they will be sent a text asking them if they need some support. So just to give you a bit of a picture of what that looks like over the program from after the first trimester of the pregnancy through to Bub almost being 1 year old, you can see in this little table on the left that we've got the sort of a summary of the topic that they'll be checked in about. So for instance, the negative means before birth and the positive is post-birth. So an example there around the crying that I used at +6 weeks after birth is the message that we had a look at before. They'll be asked to see how they're coping with the bub if they're crying. And on the right-hand side, that image sort of depicts the screenshot that the dad would see. It's really just a sliding scale of whether they're going good or not so good. And if they aren't going so good, the text we send them is, hey, it looks like things might not be going so well. Text back 1 if you've got some support and you're okay, or 2 if you'd like some support. And so those dads that text back 2, we send them then a link to either Panda or soon to be 13 Yarn for our Indigenous dads to get some phone counselling. I thought I'd just quickly run over those partnerships that we've got in terms of follow-up support, and particularly linking to this mood checker. But we've also partnered up with Red Nose and Panda to support those dads that have identified they have a partner with mental illness. And we'll do that at our enrolment stage once that program's through. That's actually being looked to be run very shortly. They're just finalising the message set. So if dad does enrol and say, yeah, my wife suffers from a mental illness, they will get different messages and different supports. I mentioned before, if some way through the pregnancy, if there's a miscarriage, dads have an opportunity to let us know and we can link them up with the similar counselling support, or for that matter, a stillbirth. We're trying to do a lot more content development in the space of father inclusive practice for workers, as well as trying to sort of give some really simple infographics for our dads. We're pretty active on social media, trying to give some positive messaging through the social media channels that SMS4Dads have. And we'd love to hear from you too. We've got a bit of chat time at the end of this. If there's any interesting programs that are father specific or about team parenting in that perinatal period, we'd love to hear about them. We are doing some evaluation and research too. We're going to look at some sort of evaluation for this new program, including for First Nations dads, just around the reach. How are we going with engaging our first time dads? What's the efficacy like of the project? Is it improving their preparedness? Is it helping with their co-parenting and self-care? We want to see if services are adopting it and is it useful? And we also want to learn a little bit about these adaptations of the standard SMS4Dads for our Indigenous dads, for our dads that are experiencing a partner with mental illness, and those dads that have had a loss of a baby through a miscarriage or a stillbirth. So we'd really like to see how our adapted message set is traveling with those men. So I'm going to finish up a little bit earlier, Em. I've sort of come to the sort of back end of my presentation, but I might show one more video. What can you guys do if you're interested in following up on this? We've mentioned about signing up for the sample set of messages to road test what you think of them. We'd love those practitioners and health workers that have some roles in maternity health services or men's health to spread the word. We know that the best way through to our soon-to-be new dads is through the new mum. So if you can spruik SMS4Dads amongst your networks, that would be most appreciated. The feedback from dads is often, why did you sign up for SMS4Dads? They'll say, well, she told me to. So it's a good example of our dads doing what they're told. And let us know if you've got any online resources you think are really suitable for this program that we can link to the messages, fact sheets, any videos for that perinatal period. So, pretty much up until Bub's 1 year old. And we'd also love to partnership with anyone who's developing resources specifically for father in that period of time. So I'm going to stop my preso there and just quickly show you a bit of a short video from some of our dads to tell them about their journey, our Indigenous dads in when they became fathers.
Didn't know how to feel, what to feel. Took me a couple of months for it to sink in. Couldn't wipe the smile off my face all day. Yeah, it was a good feeling. I had no idea what I was doing.
So I was like the type of person that'd be out drinking and stuff all the time. It was like a wake-up call.
I always wanted to be a dad, but I didn't think it was going to come this soon.
At first, I was a bit scared. I didn't know much about babies or what to do and stuff.
It's really important when they have someone there, especially through their times, just to even have a yarn to.
Couldn't ask for any better mates. They understand.
But yeah, my father wasn't there. Makes me want to be a better dad.
The fact that I get to wake up every day with my boys in my life is probably one of the reasons why I'm still around here today.
If you need the support, go get it. Don't take off and have nothing to do with it.
It's a gift to be able to be a father.
It's the only thing that I want to be, a father to my son.
So that concludes the formal part of my presentation. I guess I've got some promotional links there for you to have a look at. I'd like to sort of just open it up to the audience. If you've got any comments or questions or advice or experiences you would like to share.
So Dave, I've popped those links into the chat so people can get access to them. And while they're thinking about their questions, I've also added in a short survey. If they could just click on the short survey and take a few minutes to fill that out, that really supports Dave and the work that he does, and also about our seminar series. So thank you for that. And if anyone's got questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. or just give Dave a hoy right now?
Hi, Dave, I've got a question. Hi. Do you know how many dads you've been able to reach by this means? And you might have mentioned it, I might have missed it. And, you know, just over what sort of period of time, how's that sort of part of it going?
I think from when they first started this program a number of years ago, right through to now, there's been about 8,000 dads that have signed up. In this latest sort of period since, say, August, we've only had 35 Indigenous dads, but we're really yet to launch the SMS4Dads sort of branding, and that's happening in the middle of October. So we're hoping in the lead up to Christmas and afterwards that we will get more Indigenous dads on board. But generally, you know, across Australia, there's about 8,000 dads that have used the service so far.
I have another question.
Looks like
You've got
Leslie
another
can't turn off.
Yeah, she just can't turn off. I just wonder if you're able to turn off Leslie's mute. I can't turn it off from here.
Oh, okay. How would I do that, Em?
So when you go to her, look at the thing where it says her name in the top right corner. There's the 3 buttons, and it says it should say unmute or ask to unmute. So I think maybe none of us have.
No, it's not letting me do it. But Leslie, feel free to use your fingers and type in a question if you'd like. But sorry about that. It doesn't seem that we can unmute you.
I think Vicky's got another question anyway. Well, if Leslie, you're happy to type.
Yeah, I was just wondering about the amount of you refer to, the number of times you send out a text. Do you have information like data that might be electronically collected about how engaged they are with the text overall?
Yeah, that's a good question, Vicky. We do look at our analytics regularly, and surprisingly, it's fairly low click-through rate is the terminology for links. Like, we've got, I think out of the 340 messages we send in that overall period, only about 80 have links to further information, and we get about 20% click-throughs. So it's a challenge, and that's why we're trying to come up with some more interesting clickbait, they call it, is the terminology. If we say, click here for a short video about, with Uncle Mick yarning about connecting to bub to country, we're hoping those little enticers might help our men click through. And for those of us in this sort of digital world, such as myself and social media, we know that platforms like TikTok and Facebook are really important sources of information now, would you believe? It's not just for, crazy dancing. And they're becoming digital media platforms. And so we're trying to sort of get into that space to make, because let's face it, the demographic for Indigenous fathers is much younger than non-Indigenous Australians. So we're trying to get into those young people online spaces to infiltrate their feed with some positive messaging around fathering and get them engaged in looking at some resources.
Thanks.
So Dave, we've got a question from Hillock. So a really good presentation, Dave. I'm sick, so I won't turn my camera on. Hope you feel better. Work on a Tresillian early childhood and family nursing, not-for-profit, on a sleep project. In addition to referring fathers to Panda, how does SMS4Dads support sleep issues with bub?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We do have some links through to some settling resources and some information just around sleep patterns for bub. As you'd probably know, Hillock, there's some really good stuff on the Raising Children network that we use, but we know Tresillian are a specialist in that space. So if you've got some really good resources that you think we should be aware of that we might not be, please feel free to send them through to me.
Dave, Leslie's just asked about whether or not she can connect you with a crew of people who are working about birthing on country in the NT, and seeing if you would be interested in being involved with their dads. Absolutely,
Leslie. Yeah, that'd be appreciated. I might Emma might have mentioned in my bio that I do a bit of volunteer work with Core of Life, who do a lot of work in the NT with Indigenous families and young people around pregnancy and birth. And I know the facilitator, Deb Patrick, she has done a bit of work with some birthing on country crews up there. So I wouldn't be surprised there's a bit of crossover there, but please feel free to link me up virtually or otherwise. Thanks, Leslie. Appreciate the connection.
There's also, Leslie, is that, I can pass that on to you, Leslie, or Dave can, but is that the same crew that we were talking about, the Dragomir guys with the doulas on Elko Island? Just asking Leslie, she might, because that's the film that we played recently.
Oh, okay.
Good. Yeah, like really supporting women to support women. So it'd be
Yeah,
great to include the fellas.
Awesome. Yeah, we're trying to follow the our deadly women in this space and trying to give our fellas a bit of support and
Right.
So it's really good to see those birthing on country type projects that are around and doula support. Yeah, we're trying to sort of provide SMSs that are like a tap on the shoulder from a brother, like it's like, hey, bud, you might need to think about this with Bub coming, and we've got everything, on the messages around getting prepared for Bub, just safe sleeping spaces and patterns, and right through to just self-care. So I think, it's a good way of virtually providing that support that some of the other maternal programs are doing through in person and other.
For sure. I just shared your email address, and Leslie agrees that the ideas are great and it will definitely work.
I've got
Hey,
one more
Larissa.
follow-up. Oh, Larissa, you go.
Hey, Larissa.
That's okay. It's really interesting and great to hear that some of the support is going out there. My first question is, I suppose, family related, but so for dads whose partner might be Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, but they aren't, which program would they end up going to?
That's a good question, but I guess they would probably just go in the mainstream program because we asked them, do you identify as Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander? But it's not without saying that they can still access some of those videos and other resources that are made specifically for First Nations dads, if they did want to connect Bub with mum's culture, so that's a good question though, Larissa, because we know that is a common issue.
Yeah, because I've had a few patients in the past and I was practicing who's they were really gratified to realise they could take their baby, say, to the AMS, even though they weren't Aboriginal, but the dad was.
Yes.
And then like my brother wanted to connect his son in with the Aboriginal side of the family, which was his partner's family, but he didn't know how he fit in with that. So it was kind of like a interesting. And then the other question I had was just with the self-care stuff, does it cover like nutrition, alcohol, smoking, any of those type of things?
Yeah, it does have some smoking cessation sort of messages in there. I know there's been some debate around keeping them there. We do have some specific messages around alcohol intake aimed at the dad, saying, it's really important you support mum to drink less or not, alcohol harms the baby. We're basically pretty blunt, saying you need to also think about your drinking habits. And I think, you don't want to bludgeon people with health promotion messages, but in that case of alcohol, we do a little bit. We say, alcohol causes harm. You've got to think about how you're drinking and that you need to support your partner not to drink, and pretty much linked to a resource that talks about dad not drinking too.
That's great. Thanks.
Thanks, Em, for putting up that little 5-minute survey too for people to complete. That'll keep people happy. Yeah, Vicky, you had another question.
I did. Just to follow up from the previous question about what items people are clicking on or how much they click forward. Do you have a sense of the particular themes that people are interested to engage with more?
Yeah, it seems to be postnatal messages. I think once the rubber hits the road, when Bub's born and life's sort of challenging, that's when people are clicking through to, I need some help here. And I don't know anything about settling, especially dads that might not have engaged in mainstream services like, you know, antenatal, postnatal classes. So yeah, we've got some, you know, higher uptake on those resources around swaddling and baby changing, hygiene, sleeping, feeding, etc. Definitely more so than prenatal messages. I think for first-time dads, yeah, the reality doesn't hit them as much, you know, in terms of reaching out for information and support till Bub's born. Seems to be the experience.
Thanks.
I had a question about age groups. Do you find, I mean, do you count the age group? I mean, I think you count
Yes.
the age groups, so I'm just interested, younger or older, or is it sort of doesn't seem to make much difference?
I couldn't give you the analytics on that, Em. I know we have dropped the age of enrolment from 18 to 15. We had to get AH and MRC approval to do that because we're finding a lot of our dads, particularly in rural, remote areas, are younger. And this is a perfect information service for them. But generally, our demographic target is 15 to 35, first-time dads. But it's a really good question because, yeah, I think getting it out amongst our younger men is really important. And it might not be them, it might be cousins or brothers or mates that are going through it, and they can say, hey, have you checked this out? Thanks, Larissa, for the breastfeeding and bonding resources there. I have seen those ones. They're great. Yep.
Looks like we've got no more questions, Dave.
We could, I really appreciate the opportunity to tell people about SMS4Dads and the upcoming SMS4Deadly for our First Nations dads, which will be launched, as I said, on the 13th of October. We're actually doing a bit of a on-country launch in Fitzroy Crossing. I'm not going to be there, unfortunately, but some of my colleagues, Uncle Mick Adams and the project chief investigator, Associate Professor Richard Fletcher, they'll be going to Brooms with a men's outreach program and then going on to Fitzroy Crossing to launch it in the community. So yeah, hopefully we get a bit of media uptake, both mainstream and other. And yeah, really appreciate the opportunity to tell you about SMS4Dads, and reach out if you need some more information. And really appreciate you completing the feedback form. Thanks, Emma.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks everybody for coming. And just to remind you to put in your diary for 6th of October with Dr. Sarah Bernays. But today was fantastic. I learnt heaps, and I definitely will be sharing your resource with as many people as I can. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Have a lovely afternoon.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Em.